Hello, this is the RPG Crawler, and welcome to another product review. We're going to do another off-the-cuff review here, and if you're wondering when the scripted reviews will be coming back, that will be next time, most likely, because I actually have products that lend themselves to more scripted reviews next time. This time, we're going to take a look at Tome of Adventure Design by Matthew Finch. Yes, the guy that was behind a lot of the old school stuff. This one was developed by Matt Finch and Bill Webb. It's available from Frog God Games. Lists at $42 on their website. I actually got it a little bit less because I got it during one of their sales in conjunction with something else. It is clocking in at about 300 pages. Nice solid hardback and actually pretty well bound, especially for what it is. It is listed as being for Swords and Wizardry and Pathfinder, but it's honestly useful for any medieval fantasy system. It has a certain old school feel to it, which means that it may be more useful for those who play older school systems or an older school inspired campaign. But considering that there's no real statistics or no real game mechanics listed in here, then you probably can use it for just about anything. Now, what is it? What is the Tome of Adventure Design? Well, the Tome of Adventure Design is divided into 4 books. Well, it's one book, but it's listed as 4 books within the book. Each of one has several individual sections. Most of them have an introduction, which is written in a scholarly manner by Matt Finch, whom I might add is way more qualified to speak in a scholarly manner about role-playing games than I am. At least from what I've read of his. It does have an overall introduction and a section on creativity, but by and large, the majority of this book, and this is why I'm doing it as an off-the-cuff kind of review, the majority of this book are simply tables. And these tables are designed for ideas, like to generate random ideas. They're not like some random generation tables where you can actually sit down and generate an adventure or a dungeon in exact detail as is and move it directly from the roll to the piece of paper. Those usually end up a bit goofy. What this one does is it just allows you to either randomly or pick from the table an overall approach to a particular adventure. And you can actually generate quite a bit from this. The first book actually deals with principles and starting points of general adventure design, including locations, missions, the villain's plan, and just has a bunch of tables that go towards that approaches adventure design in one method. Book 2 covers monsters, monster types, and general monster abilities and such, and it has a lot of tables which enable you to design monster, like unique types of monsters, maybe for use as a villain, or maybe just to go ahead and throw ideas together for an entirely new monster type. Book 3 approaches adventure design in terms of dungeon design, and that actually has a lot of tables made to get not the intricate details of a room-to-room design, but rather the overall feel and look and history of a particular dungeon, although it does have tables for tricks, traps, and dungeon dressing, which can be useful for pretty much everything. The final book covers non-dungeon adventures, and it is similar to the book 1 in that it covers like an overall adventure design, except this covers like the details that you'd find in an adventure, such as buildings, settlements, that sort of thing. Now, I know some of you are wondering, well, what do you do with a book of tables? And I thought that too when I was looking through it. I was actually kind of almost reluctant to order this at first. I gotta be perfectly frank. I was not impressed with the sales pitch on the Frog God Games site, and you guys really probably need to work on that. But what this book is extremely useful for is for somebody who's already pretty creative over things but runs a lot of adventures. It can help kind of stir more and different styles of adventure just by offering suggestions from the table. And as I said, I was not really impressed with it, but I did order it anyway because I happen to love Frog God Games stuff. I was not impressed with it, but after I ordered it and after it came in and after I actually started taking a look at this stuff, it's way more useful than I thought it would be. I mean, honestly. I'm looking at this stuff. Oh, okay, look. I said it wasn't in the dungeon. I'm sorry, I'm just flipping through this. Again, this is actually a section I did not notice before. I literally just said the dungeon part wasn't about the specifics of the dungeon, and yet it has a basic set of tables for designing the intricacies of the dungeon rooms themselves. So I take that back. Apparently, it does have sections on that. Every time I open this book, that's really the strength of this book. Every time I open it, I find a sub-table that I really did not think of or did not notice before. And I'm sure eventually when I get through it cover to cover over and over and over again, I'll know the full amount, the full details of these tables. But it's really just kind of an idea percolator. You can actually take the adventures and the monsters and the dungeons and the locations and such directly from the book and try to go ahead and work with them as is. But really what it's for is to give an outline which you then develop yourself. So it says on the back that it is an invaluable resource when it's time to prepare for the game. It's basically promoting itself as an ability to throw together an adventure in 2 hours using this book. And honestly, I can usually throw an adventure together in about 2 hours. Not necessarily every single map, but like the general idea. But I can see where this book would help with that. If you're suffering from writer's block or whatever, or you're in a position where you're between already prepared adventures, this can easily help generate one very, very swiftly. You may have to massage the results a little bit, but you can go ahead and roll through the tables and get a pretty decent, not stats, but a pretty decent description of a villain, or a list of the villain's motivations, or a description of the area that they are in, or a particular type of creature that the party hasn't really seen before. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the specifics. Not all the specifics, but some of the specifics. They do, as I said, at the beginning of each chapter, there's an introduction and a quick couple pages of scholarly talk about what follows. And in this, they approach Matt Finch approaches adventure design in a couple different ways, and they're ways that can really that honestly that when you're a long-time dungeon master, a lot of times, or a long-time game master, a lot of times you'll find yourself designing adventures in the same way every single time, and that, while it allows you to streamline your process, it can limit the outcomes a lot. And it's important to vary that kind of thing up. And what these introductory sections before each particular book really contribute to that is a reminder that honestly you should try different approaches to developing an adventure sometimes, simply to vary up your result. Because if you vary up your result, then your players will not necessarily find your adventures becoming real boring or predictable. Between that, varying your results and using some of the randomization in here, you can pretty much guarantee that your party's not gonna, your players are not gonna find your adventures too predictable. But let's run through one of these things. Let's look through a few of these tables here, just as an example of the kinds of things that you would find in this particular book. And the first one I'm going to look at is in the very first book. There's a series of tables called the Villain's Plan. And it starts with a simple percentile table, and the majority of these tables are percentile based. So you'll need 2d10 or whatever. That simply states the type of the villain plan. And this is the villain's plan in very general terms. For instance, the villain could be looking to destroy a community, and it's basically the villain is trying to kill, economically destroy, or otherwise irreparably damage a particular community. So let's say you got that particular result. Then you flip a couple tables over, and each page has its own table, and each table corresponds to one entry on that overall master plan thing. And I see destroy community. It actually takes two tables. It's another percentile, a percentile-based table. It takes a full two tables, and then you'd roll on that. So now that you know that the plan for that particular game session or whatever is to destroy a community, you'd roll on this, and it'd tell you things like why they want to destroy that community. Or no, first of all, it says intended method of destruction. So this first table on this page, on one page, is nothing but the method by which the villain is intending to destroy the community. So we look up here, you got things like murder, like plague, or like poison. The villain is poisoning something: water, food, air, animals, crops, clothing, etc. And then the next table tells you the reason why. They can go ahead and generate that out, and you roll randomly on that, and you get results like community knows something about the villain's past, or revenge. And some of these sections say see table below. So if you decide with some rolls that the villain's plan is to destroy a community, they're going to destroy it through poison, and their purpose is revenge, then you look through and you've got a table this one actually does take two pages up. Reason for seeking revenge, and then you roll on that, and you can go ahead and just get a random result on that, and it's giving you things like a villain or patron was beaten for beliefs or teachings, or a member of community once foiled one of the villain's plans, and it gives you a very solid reason why the villain is going after that community. So there it is. You've got the villain's purpose, their method, and their reasoning, and there's the core of a particular adventure hook. Then if you want to find out, what a particular villain is, they actually have tables for that. We'll go with let's see if we got. If we've got it in here, actually. It won't be in that one. It'll be in one of the later books, which is probably non-Dungeon Adventure Design. No, it's got that. Let's just take a look at monsters. And that occupies the second section of the book. And in monsters, you've got, as I said before, you've got tables to generate monsters, and it starts very general with the monster category. And a lot of these categories that are listed in here are equivalent to Pathfinder categories, although they aren't necessarily identical. For instance, it's got beasts, constructs, draconic, elemental, etc., which vaguely correspond to Pathfinder-style monster diagrams, or monster categories. They vaguely correspond to Pathfinder-style monster categories, but not necessarily to, say, 5th edition categories. But you can derive them pretty much and figure out from there. But then there's some that don't fit into anything, like a mist creature. Well, what kind of mist creature? And if you rolled up that, then you have to look at that particular table. So let's go back to monster categories. Let's just say one of the categories is horror. So that tells you a little bit about that particular category. Once you know what monster type, you flip to the appropriate page thereafter. And they've got sections, some of them many pages long, of tables for every single one of the monster types listed. And under horrors, you've got the first table, which tells you the nature and the intellect of the horror, and even though they're both on the same table, you can roll one separate from the other. And let's say you rolled a 51 on nature of the horror. It says horror out of a mad wizard's lab. An oopsie, most likely. So it would be a mistaken horror. Then you go roll for the intellect of the horror, and so you could get anywhere from completely non-intelligent to extremely intelligent. And they also have things like barely intelligent. Actually, barely intelligence is on there twice. In fact, a lot of these are on there 2 or 3 times. I suspect because they used the same dice table. But yeah, from completely non-intelligent through extremely intelligent. And they're on there at different rarities. Then once you've got the nature of the horror and the intellect of the horror, you get to roll for the physical form of the horror. And you've actually got a couple, like this one table has 4 columns, each of which is a separate table. So you get a basic form on the first column, attributes of on the second column in case you want to mix it up. So let's say you rolled a basic form of a moth, attributes of a cat or something. Then you'd try and figure out how to mix that up. They've got a skin exterior table and an other feature table that lets you make this really messed up, monstrous kind of horror. And then finally, if you rolled like a kite and a carapace or whatever under the skin/exterior table, they've got another table for what to do then. A chitin color and chitin texture that just give you the descriptives of it. Does any of it have any sort of function in game mechanics? Not really, no. But by the end of it, you've got a description of a monster that is completely unique. And then they go through this for every single type of monster that they had in that original table. And then finally, they've got a list of tables that tell you about the combat profile, where if you can't determine the combat profile from the general description and physical description of the creature, then you can roll on this, and this will tell you not the statistics, but well, actually not the statistics, but what kinds of attacks they are. For instance, you could roll a monster's the attack routine involves limbs, and then you pick which type of limbs, and you roll on a separate table for that. So you could roll up your classic claw bite, or it could, if you've got some sort of monstrosity that's like from a wizard's lab or something, you could roll up entirely different types of attacks, including special attacks, including weird effects if those particular attacks land, and so on and so forth. So you see how one table kind of leads to another table, kind of leads to another table. And while you can use it as just a totally random generator for any particular aspect of fantasy role-playing. And some people may find that not too useful, and there are certainly a lot of online resources for that sort of thing. But the simple depth of these tables and the way that they interact with one another can make it useful for somebody. And I gotta come out and say it, I'm finding some use from this book. Part of it from having a number of tables that I can go ahead and roll on at any moment just to generate something if I get stuck, if I'm not really feeling well that day, but I know I've got to come up with a complete adventure and I just haven't done it yet. I can use this book to go ahead and come up with at least a framework to work from. And if I've got a framework, I can run from it. Or, and this is the other thing about this book that I found, is simply reading through the tables. I have not read this book cover to cover, but I have read certain sections that particularly interested me. And I found that simply reading the tables gave me a lot of background inspiration for creating my own stuff. So it does have its uses. I mean, it's one of those things that I looked at it, I thought, I'm never going to use this. But I ordered it, and I can tell you right now that I've already used it a couple times, and I would probably use it a lot more. So what it boils down to is it worth it? Is it worth the money? Now that Is it worth the $42 list price? The fact that it can be used in pretty much any medieval fantasy style role-playing game is a plus. It's a huge plus. The fact that it's a pretty decent sized book. It's about the same size as most of the general rules hardcovers. It's got a lot of tables in it to do stuff with. That is a plus. But I don't know that it's worth $42. If you can find it on sale, and they've got it on sale a lot of times, it might be worth it. Also, they do have a PDF, which is, I believe, $15 off. So it's still pretty pricey for a PDF. But they've got a PDF you can purchase on their site and so forth. That might be a better bet if you need it. Would I buy this again? As I said, I picked this up when Frog God Games was having a sale. I picked this up with another booklet, which I'm actually gonna roll into a review later. I don't know that I can tell you right now, flat out, I would not have purchased this at full price at the time. Now that I know what's in it, now that I know what is in it, I'd have to say I might have purchased it at full price. It's one of those books where if I didn't have any other book to purchase, but I had some spending cash or whatever, and I wanted something to streamline adventure design, which is exactly what the book says on the cover. It's a tome of adventure design. It does what it says. It will help a dungeon master, a game master, even one who's had a lot of experience. For instance, I've been running things since the mid 80s. Since I was very young, it is helpful even to me, and I've been running the game for a long time. So its value is going to be determined solely by whether you need a kind of kickstart to your creative process every so often. If you're an individual who's relatively creative but regularly finds themselves with some sort of writer's block when you come up with adventures, there's probably going to be more advantages to you than somebody who has just a wellspring of ideas. It's going to be advantageous to you. It's going to be useful to you if your players say a lot of your things are too similar, because this really will give you ideas to break it up and make them look a little different. But if you're doing just fine with what you've got, I'd recommend looking for it on sale or something, because that full price, $42 is $42, and you can get a lot of chunkier, meatier setting type stuff for a similar price. But as I said, I'm not regretting purchasing it at the price I got, and I probably would purchase it if I was running into a dry spot right now. If I was coming up on a couple months where I just really couldn't figure something out, then I would say the $42 would be worth it for me. But that is as it may. It is a decent product overall. It is from Frog God Games, as I said, Tome of Adventure Design by Matt Finch. I will put links in the description below as always. This has been the RPG Crawler with another product review. Expect a more structured review next time. If you like what you've seen, remember to leave a like, comment if you've got feedback, and subscribe for more computer and tabletop role-playing videos. If you want to help support the channel, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/rpgcrawler. Until next time, take care and goodbye.